The reason that I pretty much call out this topic today is that um, a lot of what makes Agile really, really hard is the fact that UX professionals spend a tremendous amount of their time compensating for what their coworkers don't know about UX. And this is, I think, uh, a cultural thing in the UX community. We very much like to be the experts and we like to play the role of the expert. And because we are often positioning ourselves as being the experts in UX, uh, we take this sort of attitude of don't worry your little brains about this. We've got this. You've called on the experts. We're going to take care of all of this. And while that feels like it's a good way to sort of be valued and protect our work, it actually is quite constraining. It holds us back a lot because not only do people not know what UX people do, which of course hurts our promotion of the value that we bring if nobody understands what we do and we sort of treat it like some sort of black magic or mysterious thing. But they don't know when to call us in. They don't know where we add value. And most importantly, they can't contribute. And because they're not contributing, we have to do all of the basic things that they would have to do and that they could be doing. And because of that, we are constantly compensating for their lack of knowledge. And all of that work actually stops us from getting to the really hard problems that someone with UX expertise really is the best suited to take on. Much of UX work is pretty sort of straightforward stuff. It's understanding how to lay out a screen, or it's understanding how to plug components in a design system, or how to ask basic questions in a research environment. And none of those things are really that special. And our value isn't kept um, because we have kept that secret to ourselves. This is not an act that if everybody knows how to do these basic things, they won't need UX people. The problem is when nobody knows how to do the basic things, only UX people can do them, and that then becomes the bulk of their work. And every UX person is just doing the same basic tactical effort over and over and over again. And this is the problem. The problem is that the majority of our work has been kidnapped because we are the only ones who can do the basics. And so, in order for us to be able to get past that and do more advanced, more sophisticated work, solve the real problems that it really does take these years of expertise that we're accruing to do, we need to make sure that those skills are elsewhere in the organization. And this is really where our value is. Now, part of this has to do with the fact that there's a mentality in the tech world overall that learning is a zero-sum game. That if you spend time learning one thing, it means you can't spend time learning to be good at something else. And if you try to be good at more than one thing, you actually do yourself a disfavor, which is pure bunk. There's no evidence supporting that learning how to, do research makes you a bad designer, or learning how to do design makes you a bad researcher, or even learning how to code somehow hurts your UX skills. Yet people get very sort of up in arms around this idea that if you try to do more than one thing, if you're not some sort of specialist, which that really isn't the definition of specialist, uh, um, that somehow you're going to have a problem that suggests that you won't be good at anything. And I see this mentality over and over and over again, and it's problematic. And it's particularly problematic in Agile. And the reason is that when the people, the sort of team of people who were on the ski slopes when Agile was conceived as a way of working and sort of defined the Agile Manifesto and the Agile values and all the things that went into that, when that team was there, they were perceiving that the teams, the Agile teams that would be working on this, would actually be equal in their skill sets, that it wouldn't be a group of specialists, but instead it would be a group of people who had general skills across the board and could step in and do the work that somebody else wasn't getting to. And this turns out to be problematic when we decide that the UX people bring a UX specialty and the developers bring a development specialty and the product managers bring a product specialty, because what we end up doing is we end up siloing the work, and only people who are available at that moment to do that thing are the ones who should be doing that thing. And what that does is it creates backlogs. It creates a problem of there's too much work for one person to do, but nobody else can do that work, so that work sits and waits. And Agile abhors a backlog. Organizations in general abhor a backlog. And they do everything they can to work around it. And usually what that means is we just skip the UX part. We just put out what we have and we don't think about it. And this is problematic. And part of this issue is that there are different ways you can structure a team. And one of the analogies I found myself going to these days is the difference between basketball and baseball teams, which, based on my understanding of non-American sports, is not that difference between the structure of a soccer / football team, as non-Americans would refer to it, and a cricket team. And here's the basic difference, right? In a baseball team, and as my understanding of a cricket team, everybody has a job, right? You have pitchers and you have third basemen and you have catchers and right fielders in baseball. And in cricket, you have all sorts of positions with names on them that I could not actually tell you because they make no sense to me. But the basic idea is that a pitcher has a very different job than a catcher or a third baseman or a right fielder. And they have a very honed set of skills. The pitchers don't even hang out with the players in the same place when they're waiting their turn, right? Everybody's in the dugout except for the pitchers who are in a different place. And the result is that the pitcher basically has this very siloed set of skills and only pitchers pitch. And it works for baseball. But that same mentality would not work for basketball. In basketball, you do have positions. People do start in a place on the court. But once the ball's in motion, it's more about who has the opportunity, who has the ability to fill in and take the shot. And it's about bringing the skills up. And so this is really the difference that we're talking about here. On a basketball team, you need players who all have the same basic skills, They all have the ability to get the ball down the court and into the basket. And they might be really good at one set of skills, but if two people are good at those same sets of skills, that's even better for the team. So if someone's good at 3-point shots, having two people who are good at 3-point shots is actually better. Having three people is even better. So the more you can cross-breed the skills, the better the team gets overall. Whereas in a sort of baseball mentality, if other people can pitch, it doesn't really help you. And so what you really need is to think of an Agile team as more like a basketball team than a baseball team, or more like a soccer team than a cricket team, right? This difference is really key. And the reason is that we need whoever is in that space at that moment to be able to at least do the basics, right? Right now, you see designers having to draw out wireframes or create detailed Figma diagrams with every little detail listed out, because they can't trust that the various other team members, the developers in particular, will be able to understand what to do. But if the developers have just the basic understanding of laying out a screen, of understanding how people interact with the things they build, if they have a design system which acts as scaffolding to help them build it out, then suddenly they are capable of at least doing a decent job on the basics. And when they can do a decent job on the basics, the UX folks don't have to spend all that effort drawing everything out in every possible state and then going back and checking the work, because they can trust their coworkers to actually do a decent job to begin with. And that's where we're at here, is that because we have to spend so much time just drawing every detail out, and then we have to go back and double check that they translated that so well, then suddenly we get into this position where we are not able to go off and actually solve bigger problems for our users, problems that really only someone who's thinking about the experience of the users is going to be able to take a step back and have the time to fill out. And so that's what we're really talking about here, is getting the development team to actually have those basic skills. We're not talking about making them the best designers in the world. We don't need them to be the best designers in the world, but we also don't need them to have zero knowledge about what good design is. And that's the difference here. And so what we're talking about is basically starting with this idea that there's a difference between good UX and poor UX. When you can't tell what the difference is between good UX and poor UX, you get to this problem where there is you can't tell whether what you're putting out is actually good for users or not. And so one of the things that you have to learn is, what does good UX look like? Because if you can't tell, you look at your work and anything looks like good UX. But the problem is, accidentally coming up with good UX, that's not going to happen. The odds are dramatically against you if you try to accidentally just deliver something that's good. It's not going to happen. So what this does is it forces UX designers to have the constant job of cleaning up the developer's mess, We can't trust the developer to put out something good because when the developer looks at it, it all looks the same. And when it all looks the same, they can't control whether they're producing something that's a good user experience or a poor user experience. And so now the designers are in this job of cleaning up messes. And if they're spending all this time cleaning up messes, they're not spending the time figuring out if we're solving the right problems or if we're solving the right problems in the right way. And so that's the issue. When I look at UX teams and I work with the various teams that I'm coaching and mentoring, what I'm seeing is they're spending a tremendous amount of time just cleaning up the poor UX that developers produce on their own. Now, one way that people try to solve this problem is they try to hire more designers, but we have seen that there's a limit to that. We can't have enough designers all the time to clean up everything that's there. And the issue here is that what we really want to do is move beyond roles to skills, right? When we think of, well, only designers design and only developers develop, then we're in this position where we're thinking purely about roles as definition. But it turns out that skills can be shared across individuals, right? A good designer can also learn to be a good banjo player. There's absolutely nothing that stops them from doing that. And a good developer can learn to be a good designer. They don't have to be the world's best designer, but if they just learn some basic design skills, their design gets better. And when their designs get better, they can look and see the difference. They can see what makes something good design and what makes something poor design. And what we're talking about here is moving people up the scale of competence. It turns out that there were a couple of management trainers who back in the 70s figured out that competence comes in gradients. And we can think of competence as basically being a process by which we move from incompetence to competence. And interestingly enough, there's a set of transitions that people go through. They start with basically unconscious incompetence. And unconscious incompetence, this is what Martin Broadwell taught us, is when someone can't tell the difference between good versus bad. So good to them is the same as being bad. And they just can't see it. And the problem is that when you think that good and bad are the same thing, and you don't know how to intentionally produce good design, because remember, design is the rendering of intent. If you don't know how to intentionally do this, then what happens is that you typically produce poor design. And this is problematic because by constantly producing poor design, somebody else has to clean that up. Somebody else has to make it better on your behalf. So instead, what we want to do is we want to transition. And the first step in that transition is to go to conscious incompetence. And at least in conscious incompetence, you can see that good is not the same as bad. And in our case, good UX and poor UX are not the same thing. And so now that you can see this, now that you can look at something and say, oh, yeah, that's not right. You may not know what to do about it to make it right, but you are now in a position to at least accept that what has happened, the basic skills are here. And we call this transition from good to bad, we call that uh, literacy, developing literacy. So in our case, it's UX literacy. That's when you go from unconscious, that's supposed to be an arrow, from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. That's basically the understanding of good versus bad design in our case. But there's another transformation that happens in here. And that transformation is when we go from conscious incompetence to conscious competence. And conscious competence now says that you have enough skills in order to not only see good versus bad, but you have enough skills to actually do something about this. You can start moving the work that you do to make it better. And we start this by having, best practices and guidelines and principles and learning some basic concepts on how to do this. And we can also add tools like design systems and style guides and other things that help us understand how to make this work. And that we call UX fluency. When you're learning step by step how to make this work, you get there, right? Let's think about this in terms of something else, like cooking, right? When I'm unconsciously incompetent, I don't know what tastes good or bad. So when I make something and I try it, to me, it feels just as good as anything else. But other people who know the difference, they're not impressed. And, they chances are it's not going to be good. But when we get to conscious incompetence, now at least I can tell it's not good. Now, a lot of people quit at this point. They're like, oh, I can't cook. I can't design, right? And they stop here. But for those who persist, they get to the point where they can do decent things by, let's say, following a recipe. And if they have a good recipe that's easy to follow, they come out and they get a good outcome. And that's what we're doing with conscious competence. We're getting to better outcomes. Here we can see that in unconscious competence, we can see that we're not getting to good outcomes. And in unconscious incompetence, we can see that we are we don't see the difference in the outcomes. So we go from understanding that the outcomes could be good or bad, and that what we tend to produce is bad, to actually getting something better. Now, in Martin Broadwell's little framework here, there was one more stage, which is unconscious competence. And unconscious competence is when you get good enough at this that you can get to outcomes without any of the scaffolding, without any of the structure, without thinking about every step. And this is what we refer to as mastery, right? You can actually get very good at what you do, and it just becomes second nature. So you don't need to think about it. It just happens. And these are the things that we as UX professionals are very good at. And we get very good at this point. We don't need our developers to become masters at this. They don't have to get here. But if we can get them literate, we can at least have them see the difference. And it becomes less of a fight to get them to actually do a good job. And then if we can give them the tools and the structure and the scaffolding, we can get them basically fluent, it allows us to spend more time here in mastery. And so this is what we're really talking about. We're talking about literacy and fluency. And by getting this getting this as basic skills within the Agile team, we see a big change in the speed and capability of the Agile team, because we're no longer creating backlogs. We're no longer creating this problem of having to sit and wait for the one person or the two people on the team who have the only skills to be able to do the work. And that is key, right? That is absolutely key, because once we get everybody to be able to see that this is a good user experience, that the information architecture is good, that the user interface is good, that the design of what we're producing is good, that the flows are working well, that the interaction design is good, right? Each of these things, so basic components of UX, really do make a difference. And one way to do this is actually to focus on exposure. Exposure is, you can think of as a training studio, a training dojo, right? A dojo is a martial arts term for a place where you learn how to do this. And the problem that we have in a lot of teams is that we have separated out the actual experience of seeing people use the things we build from the building of it. And when we separate out those two things, people don't realize that the thing they just built isn't getting the outcome that they wanted. And so the more we increase exposure for developers, the more that they actually start to see literacy. Because if they did a good job, the users will have no problem with it. And when they do a poor job, they won't get the results that they expected. They won't necessarily know what to do next. But this act of exposing them to what the users do and what the users are capable, or what the users sort of react to in the designs, this helps them understand that the thing they produced actually worked, or that the thing they produced didn't work. And the result of that is that you get, you immediately see benefit. We have seen that if you can get exposure, the basic minimum that we've seen that's very influential is 2 hours. This is for exposure. 2 hours every 6 weeks. That's basically 20 minutes a week. If you can get people exposed to their users, using their product, using a competitor's product, using a prototype or an early release of the product, seeing people do whatever it is your product's supposed to do, even if they don't use anybody's product, because maybe you haven't built one yet, right? If you can see that 2 hours every 6 weeks, suddenly you see a dramatic improvement in the quality of the designs that the developers create, because they don't like creating things that are poor design. And instead, you start seeing things that are much better designs. And that's the key piece of this, right? Is that what we want to do is we want to get the people, especially the folks who are making decisions about what the code is, what the architecture is, people who are working on the back end need to see this as much as people who are working on the front end, even though they might not think of the work that they do as UI. But when they produce an architecture that stops the design from being what it wants to be, suddenly they are making design decisions. It's like, well, we can't do that. The database won't support it. Well, how did we get in a situation where the database won't support the best design we can produce? Right? So there were decisions that were made, and we need to understand how to make that happen. So this idea that what we want to do is get them the exposure they need, that grows the team. And so the more we can get each team member to actually start looking at how much they have spent on their effort, and then did it produce the results that they wanted, this is absolutely essential. And so by just starting with exposure, we see a big jump in the capabilities, in the skills, in the literacy of the developer. So if all you did was get your development team more exposed to users over the next 6 months, you would see a huge increase in literacy amongst your development team. I have never seen this fail. So this turns out to be absolutely a key piece. And then the next thing that you can do that is extremely powerful is to actually sit and design with the developers. This act that we have of going off and designing and coming back and reviewing our results actually holds us back. Because even though we perceive it as being faster than actually working side by side with someone, the act of taking what they're working on and working with them at the same time and creating the designs while they're creating the code has real benefits, because they now start to see what happens. I mean, it's funny. A lot of parents have no trouble if their kids want to have cookies, sitting and making cookies together and playing with the dough and putting it on the pan and watching what happens when the cookies are made. And this is how kids learn to cook. This is how they get basic literacy in cooking. And we can do the same things with developers by actually letting them watch what we do, and then eventually doing it themselves, and then eventually asking them to teach others. We're basically repeating a process which in the medical profession is actually called watch one, do one, teach one. This is how in the medical profession surgeons learn new surgical procedures. They actually watch somebody do it, and then they do it themselves, and then they teach the next person how to do it, all under the supervision of someone who already knows how to do it. And the act of doing that makes them better surgeons. And so we can adopt this approach and we can use it, and it's incredibly effective. Some other techniques that really support great literacy are design critiques. And I'm not talking about sort of straight negative criticism. That sucks. I'm talking about positive, affirmative critique, which is constructive in nature. Because what you do is you let people try at something, and then you give them some feedback, some benefit to how to do it better. And they can start to see that difference between what their intention was and what the tools of design bring them. And this helps them first see literacy and then get to fluency. So by working with them and involving the developers in critique of the work that they do and workshopping that material to getting it to actually be better, you see again a dramatic improvement in their own abilities to do that on their own. And so this process of working with folks can be really, again, very, very powerful. And then the last thing that I want to focus on here is a process by which we talk about deconstruction, which is, this is the act of basically teaching the architecture of design, right? Everything in design has a name, right? Components have a name. We have radio buttons, we have checkboxes. When you are not UX literate, you don't know whether to use a radio button or a checkbox because you don't understand that type of level of UI literacy. You don't understand what makes a good menu a good menu. You don't understand why there are limits to the number of things you want to put in a menu. You don't understand how if buttons don't look like buttons, then people don't press them. Or if you don't give people some sort of immediate feedback that their button has been pressed, they'll press it multiple times, which may cause the application to, for instance, make multiple purchases. So understanding the basics allows us to see these differences. And just starting with, the basic vocabulary of information architecture, the basic vocabulary of interaction design, the basic vocabulary of research, right? Understanding what's a leading question, what isn't a leading question, can have a huge benefit on how people approach their own work and start making it better, start being more fluent, being more competent. So by having deconstruction sessions where we actually take multiple designs and just talk about the terminology, talk about what makes them different. What does it look like when you have lots of white space versus when you have very little white space? What does it look like when you have good information hierarchy versus poor information hierarchy? These types of design elements just allows people to become more familiar and suddenly take away the mystery of basic user experience design and research. And if we can do that, we suddenly are in a place where the teams around us have those skills and we no longer have to spend most of our time cleaning up their work. And when we don't have to spend time cleaning up their work, we can actually work on the bigger problems of making sure that the design is not overwhelmingly complex, or making sure that we haven't missed basic expectations, or making sure that we are anticipating needs and exceeding expectations. All the things that lead to excellent design work. All the things that lead to putting out innovative products that are seen as industry leading, all the things that we want to be involved in a day-to-day process. So this is what it means to really develop the skills. Jared here. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you'll get more videos like this. If you have any comments, questions, or thoughts, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And hey, consider joining our Leaders of Awesomeness community. It's completely free, home to over 50,000 UX leaders who regularly share questions, ideas, inspiration about their experiences. The link is in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.